Two fighter jets bracketed her Apache at 400 knots, and she banked hard into them instead of running. I was on the ground controller's radio that morning, dug into a hilltop position above the Kestrel Pass corridor, watching the whole thing unfold through binoculars that suddenly felt useless against what was happening in the sky. Captain Inez Solano had been flying close air support for our column for 3 hours straight, methodical, precise, calling her shots to me in a voice as level as a man reading a grocery list. She had already broken up 2 ambush positions along the pass that morning without wasting a single unnecessary round, and I remember thinking, watching her work, that I had never seen a pilot fly with that particular blend of aggression and restraint. Then command in the rear, spooked by a false report that her helicopter had been compromised by enemy signals intelligence, made the decision that still turns my stomach to describe. They scrambled 2 of our own fighter jets to intercept and force her down, convinced for 11 confused minutes that the Apache in our sky belonged to someone else. Nobody in the rear command post had bothered to check the flight manifest first. Nobody had asked the obvious question: why would an enemy aircraft be flying disciplined support patterns over an American column for 3 straight hours? They simply saw an unexplained contact and reached for the fastest, loudest answer available to them. The lead pilot, a major named Denny Acafer flying the Nearjet, told me later he never doubted the outcome. An Apache against an F-16, he said. It isn't a fight, it's a formality. He said it not out of cruelty but out of simple arithmetic. His aircraft was faster, better armed, built for exactly this kind of engagement, and hers was a rotary-wing gunship with nowhere near the speed to outturn him. He radioed her twice, ordering her to descend and land immediately. She acknowledged both calls, calm, unhurried, and kept flying her assigned pattern over our column like the order didn't concern her yet. "She's not complying," Acafer told his wingman, bringing her down. That was when she laughed. I heard it over the shared frequency, low and easy, no edge in it, nothing like triumph or defiance, just the sound of someone who understood a problem completely and wasn't afraid of it. "Major," she said, "before you commit to this, you should know I flew exchange rotations with an aggressor squadron for 2 years teaching your pilots how to survive exactly this kind of intercept. I know your turn radius. I know your minimum engagement envelope. I know what your jet can't do at these altitudes that mine can." Acafer didn't believe her, not fully, not yet. He pushed his F-16 into a tight turn to cut across her nose, the kind of maneuver that ends most rotary-wing engagements before they start. She let him commit to it, watched his flight path with the patience of a woman who had already run this exact geometry in her head 100 times in training. And at the last possible second, she pulled the Apache into a hard pedal turn that no fixed-wing jet could match, dropping altitude into the folds of the pass floor faster than his radar could track cleanly against the terrain. His jet screamed past empty air where she'd been a half-second earlier. "Where'd she go?" his wingman said, and I could hear the first crack of real uncertainty in his voice. She was already climbing back into position behind and below them, using the terrain the way a hunter uses cover, and when Acafer rolled his jet to reacquire her, she was inside his minimum turn radius before he finished the maneuver, a position his own aircraft, built for speed and not for that kind of tight, controlled violence, simply could not answer. "You're inside my gun envelope, Major," she said, still without heat in her voice. "I'm not going to fire on you. I need you to understand that I could." Acafer pulled up hard, trying to gain separation and altitude, the standard answer to a threat you can't outturn. His wingman, a younger pilot named Lieutenant Farr, made the mistake of diving to try to flank her from below, exactly the maneuver she'd apparently spent 2 years training pilots not to make against a rotary-wing aircraft in mountainous terrain. She read it before he committed fully, dropped into the pass itself, below the ridgeline, and used the rock walls to break his radar lock completely. Down in the column, soldiers had stopped moving entirely, faces turned up toward a sky none of us could make sense of, the roar of jet engines echoing off canyon walls in a way that made it impossible to tell where either aircraft actually was. When Far came around the bend of the canyon expecting to find her exposed, she was tucked into a defile with her weapons systems cold, watching him fly past close enough that I heard him key his mic in something close to a shout. "I lost her. I don't have a solution. She's not where a helicopter should be able to be." Akafor tried one more pass, a coordinated pincer with his wingman, timed to close from two directions at once so she'd have nowhere left to run the terrain. It should have worked. Against most pilots it would have worked. She let them both commit, watched the pincer close on empty canyon, and in the half-second gap between their flight paths she rose out of the defile, put herself directly behind Akafor's jet at a range and angle that left absolutely no question about what she could have done, and held there. Silence on the frequency. Real silence, the kind that means men are recalculating everything they thought they understood in the last 10 minutes. "Major Akafor," she said finally, "I have a firing solution on your aircraft that I have held for 6 seconds. I am declining to use it because you are not actually my enemy today. You were given bad information by a rear command that doesn't understand what my aircraft can do in this terrain. I'd like you to relay that back to them, and then I'd like to get back to protecting the column beneath us, because they still need air support and we're all burning fuel arguing about it." Akafor didn't answer right away. When he did, his voice had changed entirely, not defeated, not humiliated, just recalibrated, a professional absorbing a hard lesson cleanly. "Copy that warpath," he said, using her call sign for the first time. "Relaying now. And for what it's worth, that was the finest flying I have ever watched in my career." She didn't gloat, she didn't linger on the compliment at all. "Appreciated, Major. Now clear my airspace so I can get back to work." The jets peeled off within the minute, and Solano dropped back into her support pattern over our column exactly as if the previous 12 minutes had been a training exercise, rather than two fighter jets trying to force her out of the sky. I watched her Apache bank low over the ridgeline and put two precise bursts into a mortar position that had been probing our flank the entire time she'd been occupied with Akafor, never once losing track of the actual mission underneath the confusion above it. Command issued a formal apology within the hour, and word of what had happened over Kestrel Pass moved through every squadron on that front faster than any official report could travel. By evening, pilots from two other wings were asking to be transferred onto missions where they might fly alongside her, just to see for themselves whether the story was as clean as it sounded over the radio net. Akafor requested to fly escort for her personally on 3 more missions before his rotation ended, and every time I heard him key up to check on her position, there was something in his voice that hadn't been there before that morning, not fear exactly, but the specific respect a professional reserves for someone who proved, cleanly and without malice, that they were better. Far, the younger pilot, asked her once over a shared meal at the airfield how she'd known exactly which maneuver he would choose before he chose it. She told him the terrain only offered a handful of honest options to a fixed-wing aircraft trying to corner a helicopter in a canyon, and that she'd simply spent 2 years teaching pilots to recognize their own instincts before the enemy could use those instincts against them. Far didn't ask a second question. He just nodded slowly, the way a man does when a lesson finally lands somewhere permanent. I still think about that laugh sometimes, low and unbothered over a frequency full of armed men convinced they had her cornered. It wasn't the laugh of someone enjoying another man's fear. It was the laugh of someone who had done the math long before anyone else in the sky that day and simply wasn't worried about the answer.